My coworker was being destroyed for abandoning her disabled son, but after she saved my life, I discovered a horrifying secret, and together we orchestrated the most devastating public takedown you've ever seen. I was at my new job at the pediatric therapy clinic when Sarah returned after a 3-month unpaid leave. Every therapist froze mid-conversation. Even the kids sensed it. Look who finally showed up. Jamie, our lead PT, said loud enough for the whole floor to hear. Guess she got bored of her midlife crisis. I'd only been there for 2 weeks, clearly missing something huge. During our morning meeting, our supervisor Diana gave this whole speech about professional commitment while staring daggers at Sarah. The woman just sat there, hands folded, taking it. And at lunchtime, I finally found out why. Because that's when Jamie cornered me by the microwave. Stay away from Sarah. She abandoned her 16-year-old autistic son and husband 2 months ago. Just walked out, no warning. She leaned in closer, voice dripping with disgust. High-functioning autism, but still. What kind of mother does that? Well, I myself had been the topic of a lot of false rumors at my old job, and I always wished someone would listen to my side of the story. So I decided to do exactly that for Sarah. And over the next few weeks, I watched Sarah's work life turn into absolute hell. Other therapists forgot to include her in case consultations. Parents started requesting different PTs after whispered conversations in the waiting room. Diana assigned her all the violent cases, the biters, the scratchers, the kids who left bruises. The break room emptied whenever she entered. Her lunch vanished from the fridge so often she stopped bringing one. But here's what didn't add up. Sarah was incredible with these kids. I watched her work with this nonverbal boy who'd bitten 3 other therapists. With Sarah, gentle as a lamb. She never raised her voice, never showed frustration. When he melted down, she'd apply joint compressions, whispering, "You're safe, I've got you. Breathe with me." She brought her own sensory tools when our supplies ran low, stayed late writing detailed home plans for parents. Nobody thanked her. They just took what they needed and went back to pretending she didn't exist. Everything changed during Marcus Coleman's session. 7 years old, severe ADHD, and his dad was this massive dude who always seemed ticked off about the diagnosis. And that day, Marcus was having a rough one, more rough than usual. He was throwing weighted balls, all while screaming, "Bloody murder!" at the top of his lungs. I was on the ground in pain when suddenly his dad burst through the door reeking of whiskey. "This is BS! He doesn't need this play baby therapy!" He yanked Marcus up by the arm. The kid screamed louder. "Mr. Coleman, please!" I started, but he whipped around, backing me against the wall. His hand slammed beside my head. "You people are scamming us, making him worse so we keep paying." Spit flew in my face. His other hand grabbed my shoulder, fingers digging in. "Maybe someone needs to knock sense into you." I froze, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Sarah appeared from nowhere, stepping between us without hesitation. "Let her go. Now." Her voice had this edge I'd never heard. "Don't tell me what to do, bitch. Heard all about you. Abandoning your own kid." She didn't flinch when he raised his fist, just spoke in a neutral tone. "You're hurting him. Step back or I'm calling CPS." Something in her tone made him release Marcus, who ran straight to Sarah, clinging to her leg. She knelt, checking his arm for marks while keeping her body between the boy and his father. Coleman stormed out screaming about lawsuits and crazy bitches. Sarah turned to me immediately. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" She gently examined my shoulder. "You saved me," I whispered, still shaking. She squeezed my hand. "We look out for each other. Or we should." That last part hit different. Diana called us into her office immediately. I expected a hug and some free wine, or at least a thank you. But instead, she gave out to Sarah. "You escalated unnecessarily. Mr. Coleman says you threatened him, turned his son against him. He was assaulting. Maybe your personal situation is affecting your judgment. Someone who abandons family might misinterpret normal parental frustration." "Diana, I saw everything," I interrupted. "Sarah saved, did she? Or did she terrorize a child against his father? Like her own son is probably terrified of abandonment." She put Sarah on probation. "One more incident. You're done." Sarah's hands trembled signing the papers. I saw her bite her lip hard enough to draw blood. Next week, everything exploded. Someone photographed Sarah's car in our parking lot at 2 a.m. and posted it in the staff group chat. Guess who's living in her car? No wonder she abandoned her family. Can't even take care of herself. The replies were brutal. Probably blew their savings on her crisis. That poor kid. Maybe if she apologized, her husband would take her back. By noon, printed copies appeared everywhere. Her locker with GOHOME scrawled across it. Sarah pulled them down one by one, hands shaking. Jamie and others laughed openly. Truth hurts, huh? That evening, I found her in the sensory room, sitting among weighted blankets, sobbing into her hands. I sat beside her, and she collapsed against my shoulder. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so fucking tired of being strong. You're the only one here who sees me. Everyone thinks I'm evil, but I had to leave." "What really happened?" I asked gently. She rolled up her sleeve. Burn scars covered her forearm. "My husband started small, but your son, that's what kills me." Tears streamed down. "His dad trained him to blame his autism for everything. He doesn't understand boundaries." My stomach dropped. The night I left, they cornered me in the kitchen. Aiden held me down while his dad, she couldn't finish. When I called 911, Aiden told them I was confused, played up his autism, said I was overwhelmed caring for him. Sweet autistic boy over hysterical mother. They left. I held her while she shook, feeling the weight of everything she'd been carrying alone. The sensory room's soft lighting cast shadows that made her look even more exhausted than before. Sarah pulled back slightly, wiping her face with trembling hands. She reached for her phone, then froze. The screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. Her face went pale as she read it aloud in a whisper. The message was from a bank teller, warning that her husband had been there asking about account access, trying to find ways around the restrictions. The door burst open. Diana stood there, taking in our embrace with cold calculation. She announced a mandatory staff meeting in 5 minutes, her eyes eyes lingering on how close we were sitting. Sarah immediately stood, creating distance between us, but Diana had already seen what she wanted to see. The meeting room felt like a courtroom. Diana launched into a presentation about new workplace policies, specifically addressing fraternization and inappropriate relationships between staff members. She kept her eyes locked on me the entire time, never once looking at Sarah directly. The implication hung heavy in the air. Jamie couldn't resist adding fuel to the fire. She suggested, just loud enough for everyone to hear, that maybe I was being manipulated by someone desperate for allies, that perhaps my judgment was compromised by misplaced sympathy. Several heads nodded in agreement. My defense of Sarah only made me sound more infatuated, more naive. After the meeting, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my boyfriend, a text asking why I'd canceled dinner again. Sarah approached me in the hallway, her face etched with guilt. She needed to get to the women's shelter before they closed intake for the night, but her car had been making strange noises all day. I had a choice. The afternoon planning meeting was crucial for my probation period. Missing it would give Diana exactly what she needed to document my poor priorities. But Sarah stood there, unconsciously rubbing her wrists where I now knew she'd been held down, and the choice became clear. Diana watched from her office window as I helped Sarah to my car. I could feel her satisfaction radiating through the glass. She'd have her documentation within the hour. The drive revealed 3 simultaneous crises. Sarah's phone died completely, the charging port finally giving out after months of damage. My boyfriend sent another text, this time angrier, demanding to know why I was choosing a stranger over us. And my email pinged with Diana's message about performance concerns that needed immediate discussion. The shelter intake required an address, but Sarah couldn't use her real one. She hesitated, then gave her mother's address, the pain of that lie visible in every line of her face. The intake worker looked suspicious, but processed the paperwork anyway. Sarah's breathing suddenly became rapid and shallow. She clutched at her chest, hyperventilating about making everything worse for Aiden. The intake worker called for help while I tried to calm her using the same techniques she used with the kids. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I got home after midnight to find my roommate's laptop open on the coffee table. The browser showed search results for Coworker helping runaway mother, with our clinic's website in another tab. She looked up at me with concern that felt more like judgment. Sarah called from the shelter's phone. Tomorrow was Thursday, she realized, Aiden's regular therapy day. Her husband would have to bring him alone for the first time. It might be her only chance to see her son, even from a distance. The hope in her voice broke my heart. My roommate found me at 2 a.m. researching domestic violence laws, custody rights, and coercive control. She sat down beside me, expressing worry about my obsession with this situation. I tried to explain, but she kept shaking her head, insisting I was in over my head. The next morning brought an email from HR. Diana's formal complaint had triggered a review of my boundary issues. They wanted to meet immediately. I sat across from the HR director as she pulled up files on her computer. She mentioned a previous employee who'd gotten too involved with a colleague's personal situation. That person had been terminated for compromising professional boundaries. The pattern was concerning, she said. We'd seen this before. My defensive responses only seemed to confirm their suspicions. Every explanation sounded like an excuse. Every justification made me appear more emotionally compromised. The meeting ended with a formal warning in my file. Sarah's husband had been busy. His Facebook post about praying for his wife's return had over 500 comments. Community members offered support, shared prayers, and expressed shock that Sarah could abandon such a devoted father and special needs child. The narrative was set in stone. I tried documenting the hostile work environment, but HR flagged my complaint as potential retaliation for my warning. Every move I made to protect myself or Sarah only tightened the noose. Another Facebook post appeared. This time, Sarah's husband listed her car's license plate, claiming it was stolen property. He urged anyone who saw it to contact him immediately. The legal intimidation was escalating. Exhaustion made me sloppy. During a therapy session, I forgot to document a milestone achievement. Jamie witnessed the error and reported it immediately. Another mark in my file, another step closer to termination. That evening, my boyfriend arrived unannounced. 3 years together, and it came down to an ultimatum delivered in my living room. Choose him or this crusade for someone who'd abandoned her own child. His words cut deep because part of me wondered if he was right. What if I was wrong about Sarah? The grocery store used to be neutral territory, but when I ran into one of my patient's mothers, she grabbed her cart and crossed to avoid my aisle. I heard her whisper to another parent about the one helping the runaway mother. My reputation was crumbling alongside Sarah's. Sarah's husband escalated again. He claimed she'd stolen the community center keys where he coached youth sports. The police would need her location to serve the warrant. Sarah had returned those keys, but proving it would require accessing security footage from that night. My best friend called with an awkward request. She needed a recommendation letter from Diana for graduate school. She couldn't afford to be associated with me right now. The friendship we'd built over 5 years dissolved in a 10-minute conversation. I helped Sarah access the community center's security footage. The timestamp clearly showed her returning the keys, but in doing so, I'd accessed areas beyond my authorization as a new employee. Diana had her smoking GN. My relief at proving Sarah's innocence was witnessed by Jamie, who immediately reported my lack of focus on actual job duties. Sarah met me in the Walmart parking lot after dark. She looked hollow, defeated. Her husband knew she was fighting back now. This wouldn't end until one of us was destroyed, she said. The war was no longer cold. It was ablaze, and we were both already burning. I stared at Sarah's exhausted face illuminated by the parking lot lights, then noticed movement near the store entrance. Her husband emerged from behind a pickup truck, phone raised, recording us. Sarah's entire body went rigid. He walked closer, still filming, his expression triumphant. I grabbed Sarah's arm and we hurried to my car, but he'd already captured what he needed, evidence of us meeting secretly at night. The next morning, morning, I discovered he'd started attending my Thursday evening yoga class. He positioned himself directly behind me, sharing his heartbreak with other students during the opening circle. The instructor listened sympathetically as he described praying for his wife's mental health recovery. Several women offered supportive touches to his shoulder. I abandoned my mat mid-class, hands shaking as I gathered my things. Back at work, different versions of the Coleman incident began circulating. Diana's official report included details neither Sarah nor I had mentioned, claims that Sarah had grabbed Coleman's arm first, that she'd screamed at Marcus. The security footage from that day had mysteriously corrupted. Jamie spread the enhanced version during lunch, adding her own embellishments about Sarah's unhinged behavior. While organizing my desk, I found my own intake notes from my first week. My stomach dropped reading my initial observations, expressing relief that the difficult coworker was on leave, noting how much calmer the clinic atmosphere felt. Diana had photocopied these pages. My own words would be weaponized against us. A 5-year-old patient innocently asked why Ms. Sarah made her son sad by leaving. Her mother had told her that sometimes mommies get confused and hurt their families. The child wanted to know if her own mommy might get confused too. I struggled through the session, watching this little girl's trust in maternal love crack slightly. Diana called another staff meeting focused on safety concerns. The parking lot security footage of Sarah sleeping in her car played on the conference room screen. Staff members gasped and whispered. Diana paused the video on a frame showing Sarah's belongings piled in the back seat, emphasizing the instability this represented. The meeting concluded with new policies about reporting concerning behavior from colleagues. Sarah's attempt to file for emergency custody was dismissed immediately. Without an established residence, the court clerk explained, she had no standing to request custody modifications. The shelter address couldn't be used for legal documents. Sarah left the courthouse with shoulders slumped, another avenue blocked. I spent hours screenshotting Sarah's published therapy articles before her husband could report them. He'd already started filing complaints with professional boards, claiming her online advice endangered children. Each article she'd written about helping autistic children understand boundaries now twisted into evidence of her dangerous ideology. Her professional digital footprint was being systematically erased. Examining her husband's coaching photos revealed a disturbing pattern. In every team picture, Aiden stood slightly separated from other children. Adult volunteers never stood near him. Group activities showed him participating alone while his father watched from a distance. The isolation was subtle but consistent. A child kept apart even in public spaces. My therapist gently suggested I needed to step back from Sarah's situation. She pointed out how my sleep had deteriorated, how I'd lost weight, how my own mental health was suffering. The professional recommendation was clear: disengage before I destroyed my own life completely. I nodded along but knew I couldn't abandon Sarah now. I attempted to record Diana's next threatening conversation, but my phone screen visibly showed the recording app. Diana noticed immediately and smiled, speaking louder about her professional concerns regarding my performance. She mentioned how unfortunate it would be if my references reflected my poor judgment and inability to maintain appropriate boundaries. The threat was clear and witnessed by no one. Sarah faced an impossible choice. The housing advocate could only meet Thursday at 2 p.m., the exact time of her mandatory therapy sessions. Missing work would violate her probation. Missing the housing appointment meant remaining homeless. She chose the advocate, knowing it gave Diana final ammunition for termination. The security guard who'd witnessed several incidents chose his job over truth. When Diana cornered him about my concerning behavior, he suddenly couldn't recall seeing anything significant. 20 years until pension, he muttered to me later. He couldn't afford to see things that might cost him retirement. His apology meant nothing when Diana filed her report. Sarah's husband posted photos on Facebook of changing all the locks. Finally feeling safe in my own home, the caption read. Comments poured in supporting his brave decision to protect himself and Aiden. The symbolic erasure of Sarah's existence from her own home was complete, celebrated by hundreds of community members. The ultimatum came through Sarah's sister. Her husband would allow her to see Aiden if she admitted in writing that she needed mental health treatment. The document would acknowledge her abandonment and instability. Sarah's hands shook as she showed me the drafted agreement. Signing meant seeing her son but losing any chance at custody. Refusing meant continued separation. Sarah's refusal was immediately posted online. Mother refuses help to see son she abandoned, spread across community Facebook groups. Comments demanded CPS intervention to protect Aiden from a mother who chose pride over her child. The narrative tightened like a noose. Digging through old police reports revealed Sarah's first escape attempt 6 months ago. Officers had responded to a domestic disturbance call. Their notes described Sarah as hysterical and her husband as concerned and cooperative. No injuries documented despite Sarah's visible bruises in the dated photos I found. The pattern of failed escapes stretched back further than anyone knew. Sarah and I realized she'd been documenting abuse in patient notes using medical terminology. Phrases like guarding behavior and defensive positioning appeared repeatedly in her session notes from the past year. Only another therapist would recognize these clinical descriptions of abuse symptoms. Her professional training had become her secret documentation system. What Diana labeled as proof of Sarah's instability was actually her reporting system. Sarah had used the clinic's incident reports to document her husband's threats, disguising them as family stressor affecting work performance. Each report Diana now used against her was originally Sarah's attempt to create an evidence trail. Sarah's mother faced her own impossible choice. Supporting her daughter meant losing access to her grandson. Her son-in-law had made that crystal clear. The woman who'd raised Sarah chose her grandson, but slipped Sarah a folder during a chance encounter at the pharmacy. Aiden's recent medical records showed concerning patterns, regression in social skills, new anxiety behaviors, sleep disturbances all beginning after after Sarah left. I started strategically befriending Jamie, pretending to agree with her perspectives on Sarah. Through casual conversations, I learned Diana's documentation patterns. She always filed reports on Fridays. She kept handwritten notes before creating official documents. Her office computer auto-locked after 3 minutes of inactivity. Small details that might matter later. A carefully orchestrated encounter with Sarah's husband at a coffee shop revealed his tells. He ordered Sarah's exact drink without seeming to realize it. Vanilla latte with an extra shot. Her morning ritual he'd apparently absorbed. His hands shook slightly when the barista called out the order. For a moment, his mask slipped, showing something raw underneath the controlled facade. Reviewing old session notes with new understanding revealed Sarah's coding system. Words like resistant and defiant appeared in quotes, not describing children but documenting what she was called at home. Patient progress notes became a diary hidden in plain sight. Child responded well to firm boundaries, translated to her own need for protection. Sarah's estranged sister appeared at the clinic, claiming she wanted to help reconcile the family. Her real interest became clear when she mentioned their mother's estate. Taking the husband's side guaranteed her position as the stable heir. She gathered information while pretending concern, another family member choosing sides based on personal gain. The competing battles meant Sarah missed her mandatory court appearance for the key theft accusation. The bench warrant issued immediately. Now she wasn't just a runaway mother, but a fugitive from justice. Every attempt to fight back created new weapons against her. My savings account drained rapidly. Lawyer consultations, gas money for Sarah, printing documents at copy centers, small expenses that accumulated into financial crisis. Sarah's accounts remained frozen while her husband enjoyed full access to their joint assets. Economic warfare waged quietly alongside the public destruction. The confrontation at Aiden's school happened during parent-teacher conferences. Sarah attempted to attend, asserting her parental rights. Her husband had already informed administration she was dangerous. Security escorted her out while other parents watched. One mother filmed it, adding commentary about protecting our children from unstable individuals. My termination letter arrived on a Tuesday. Pattern of boundary violations and poor judgment provided no specific incidents but made me unemployable in the field. Diana smiled as she watched me pack my desk. No reference meant no future in pediatric therapy. My career sacrificed for someone I'd known mere weeks. Couch surfing between friends began immediately, each stay shorter than the last as friends grew uncomfortable with my obsession. My former roommate changed the locks after finding more domestic violence research on her computer. The shelter system I'd helped Sarah navigate now looked like my own future. Sarah's mother delivered the final family blow. Standing in the shelter's visiting area, she told Sarah to stop torturing everyone with her mental illness. Just like her father had always said, Sarah was sick, needed help, was destroying the family. The words Sarah had fought against her entire life now spoken by the person who should have protected her. My investigation into Sarah's whereabouts caused the shelter worker to be questioned by police about harboring a fugitive. The safe house protocols were compromised. Other abuse victims were endangered because I'd pushed too hard for evidence. The shelter worker's husband demanded she stop bringing danger home to their children. I continued pushing despite knowing the damage I caused. Each piece of evidence seemed crucial, worth the collateral damage. The old version of me would have been horrified at prioritizing one person's fight over an entire shelter's safety, but desperation had rewritten my moral code. My ex-boyfriend's text arrived at 3 a.m. What if she really did just abandon them? What if you're wrong? The question I'd been avoiding hit directly. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. The doubt he voiced lived in my mind too, growing stronger with each failed attempt to help. During my unemployment hearing, I admitted prioritizing personal involvement over professional duties. The panel's disapproval was palpable. No employer would want someone who couldn't maintain basic boundaries. My honest testimony sealed my unemployable status. Medical records revealed the horrible irony. Sarah had reported concerns about Aiden's home environment to his pediatrician, but she'd minimized the severity, terrified of triggering a CPS investigation that might place Aiden in foster care. Her attempts to protect him had created documentation that now suggested she was the unstable parent. Her husband's lawyer filed new motions preventing Sarah from attending any of Aiden's school events, sports games, concerts, parent meetings, all legally off-limits. The last threads connecting mother and son were being systematically severed through legal mechanisms. Understanding emerged slowly about Sarah's husband. He genuinely believed he'd saved Aiden from a weak, damaging mother. His control registered as love in his mind. The narrative he'd constructed wasn't manipulation, but his actual reality. A father protecting his son from a mentally ill woman who'd abandoned them. His rage stemmed from Sarah destroying the family image he'd spent years perfecting. The coaching positions, community involvement, church leadership, all carefully cultivated to present the ideal family. Sarah's escape shattered that facade, exposing cracks he couldn't repair with manipulation alone. Betraying Jamie's trust became necessary when she drunkenly admitted knowing about Sarah's bruises months ago. I recorded her confession at a bar, pretending to commiserate about difficult coworkers. The friendship I'd cultivated for information died as I saved the audio file. Another relationship sacrificed for evidence. The old ethical version of me died completely when I shared my own abuse history publicly. Using my trauma as credibility felt like self-betrayal, but Sarah needed someone with experience to validate her claims. I posted my story in community groups, on professional forums, anywhere it might help. My private pain became public strategy. Sarah's mother secretly recorded her son-in-law's threatening voicemail. She'd called about Aiden's medication, and he'd exploded about her taking Sarah's side. The recording captured his rage, his threats to cut off access, his admission that Aiden was better off without that woman. One piece of solid evidence among dozens of implications. The minor victory of proving one threat threat felt hollow when Aiden posted on social media, "I love both my parents. Please stop hurting my family." The child protecting both abuser and victim, trapped between loyalty and truth. His words undermined every piece of evidence we'd gathered. Diana testified in support of the husband's counterclaim. Sarah had recruited an unstable ex-coworker to harass the family. My termination proved my poor judgment. The clinical documentation showed Sarah's concerning behavior. Professional testimony carried weight that personal accounts couldn't match. Everything hinged on Aiden's family court testimony. Would a 16-year-old with autism tell the truth about home dynamics? Could he distinguish between love and control? His words would determine custody, visitation, and whether the pattern of abuse was acknowledged or buried forever. I watched from the courthouse hallway as Sarah's husband paced outside the family court entrance, checking his phone every few seconds. The mandatory reporter from Aiden's school emerged from the elevator, clutching a folder. She made eye contact with me briefly before entering the courtroom. I'd convinced her to risk one meeting, promising her name would stay out of any documentation. The teacher's folder contained dates of concerning incidents she'd witnessed over 3 years. Aiden arriving at school with instructions not to speak to certain staff members. Parent-teacher conferences where his father answered every question before the boy could open his mouth. Creative writing assignments that revealed a child who understood the difference between dad's rules and everyone else's rules. Sarah sat alone on a bench, reviewing therapy notes from Aiden's early childhood sessions. The documentation showed she'd maintained his therapeutic consistency, despite escalating danger at home. Every session she'd attended with visible exhaustion, every milestone she'd celebrated while hiding fresh bruises, all recorded in clinical language that now served as evidence. The courtroom filled with familiar faces. Diana arrived in a pressed suit, prepared to testify about Sarah's concerning workplace behavior. Jamie followed, avoiding eye contact with both of us. Several other PTs had been subpoenaed, their statements about Sarah's instability already submitted to the court. I noticed Sarah's mother slip into the back row, a small recording device visible in her purse. The voicemail she'd captured played through the court speakers, her son-in-law's voice rising in fury, threatening to cut off all access if she supported Sarah. The judge's expression remained neutral, but the court reporter's fingers paused briefly over her keys. Medical records were authenticated one by one. Documentation showed Sarah had sought help multiple times over the years, each time withdrawing complaints before investigations could begin. The pattern was clear, a woman trying to protect her son while trapped in an escalating situation. Her attempts to minimize severity had backfired, creating a paper trail that suggested she was the problem. Aiden's regression in therapy notes matched the timeline of home violence escalation perfectly. Speech patterns that had improved suddenly deteriorated. Social skills that had been developing reversed. Sleep disturbances appeared in correlation with documented police calls to the residents. The medical evidence painted a picture no testimony could dispute. The teacher presented Aiden's creative writing essay from the previous month. In it, he'd written about a character who followed 2 sets of rules, one for home and one for everywhere else. The character knew which words were family words that couldn't be said outside. The character understood that love sometimes meant being quiet about things that hurt. Sarah's husband interrupted the teacher's testimony 3 times before the judge warned him about courtroom behavior. His inability to let others speak without correction was noted by the court reporter. Each interruption demonstrated the controlling behavior Sarah had described, playing out in real time before legal witnesses. The guardian ad litem interviewed me in a small conference room during recess. She wanted to understand my observations of both parents' interactions with Aiden. I described Sarah's gentle approach with difficult children, her ability to calm violent outbursts without raising her voice. I contrasted this with what I'd witnessed of the father's behavior, the physical intimidation, the alcohol on his breath, the way even his own son flinched when he moved too quickly. Other PTs were called to testify about Sarah's workplace behavior. Under oath, several admitted they'd never actually witnessed concerning behavior firsthand. Their statements were based on what Diana had told them, what they'd heard from Jamie, what had been implied in staff meetings. The gossip mill's transformation into sworn testimony began to crumble under cross-examination. The security guard who'd claimed to see nothing was subpoenaed. Faced with perjury charges, he admitted witnessing Mr. Coleman's assault on me and Sarah's protective intervention. He'd seen Diana's retaliation against Sarah. He'd watched the systematic workplace harassment unfold. 20 years until pension had seemed worth staying quiet until he sat in that witness chair. Sarah's husband's counterclaim fell apart when Diana's testimony was challenged. The timeline she presented didn't match documented dates. Her claims about Sarah's recruitment of me were disproven by employment records showing I'd been hired before Sarah returned from leave. The supervisor who'd seemed so confident crumbled when confronted with her own inconsistencies. The judge ordered a recess while reviewing evidence. In the hallway, community members who'd supported Sarah's husband began questioning what they'd believed. The Facebook posts that had seemed so convincing now looked different in light of sworn testimony. Several parents from the clinic approached Sarah quietly, apologizing for believing the rumors without questioning them. Aiden testified via video link from the judge's chambers, a child advocate beside him. His words were careful, measured, clearly struggling between loyalty and truth. He loved both parents. He missed his mom. He understood that sometimes dad got upset when mom didn't follow the rules. He knew the rules were different at other people's houses. The psychological evaluator presented preliminary findings. The family dynamic showed clear patterns of coercive control. Aiden exhibited symptoms consistent with witnessing domestic violence. His autism had been weaponized, used as an excuse for behaviors that were actually trauma responses. The evaluation recommended therapeutic intervention for the entire family system. Sarah's husband's breakdown came during his own testimony. When asked about changing the locks, he launched into a tirade about Sarah betraying the family covenant, by seeking outside help. His voice rose as he described how she'd destroyed everything by refusing to submit to family unity. The courtroom watched his mask slip completely, revealing the rage beneath his carefully constructed image. The judge's ruling addressed each point methodically. The pattern of coercive control was established. The workplace retaliation was documented. The community harassment campaign was evidenced through social media posts and witness testimony. Emergency custody modifications were warranted given the psychological harm to the child. Temporary custody was awarded to Sarah with mandatory family therapy requirements. Her husband would have supervised visitation pending completion of anger management and parenting classes. The transition would be gradual, allowing Aiden time to adjust. Both parents would participate in co-parenting counseling with a specialist in high-conflict divorces. The community reaction was immediate and divided. The youth sports team split between those who still supported their coach and those who recognized the abuse patterns. Some parents pulled their children from his teams. Others rallied around him, insisting the court had been deceived. The social media battles continued, but now with legal consequences for harassment. Sarah found transitional housing through a program for domestic violence survivors. The apartment was small but safe, with security protocols and supportive services. Aiden's first overnight visit was scheduled for the following month, after therapeutic preparation. The reunion would be slow, careful, guided by professionals who understood trauma bonds. I began rebuilding my career by volunteering at the domestic violence shelter where Sarah had stayed. My experience navigating the system as a supporter gave me unique insights. The shelter director, impressed by my dedication, offered me a part-time position coordinating advocacy services. It paid less than pediatric therapy, but felt more meaningful. Diana faced an investigation by the state licensing board after multiple complaints about workplace harassment. Jamie was required to complete ethics training after admitting to spreading unverified information about a colleague. The clinic implemented new policies about workplace gossip and supervisor accountability. The toxic culture that had enabled Sarah's persecution began slowly changing. Sarah's husband continued framing himself as the victim in community spaces. He started a father's rights group, attracting men with similar grievances. His narrative evolved but never acknowledged wrongdoing. The supervised visitations reports showed he still attempted to interrogate Aiden about his mother's activities, still tried to maintain control through the child. The criminal charges for the stolen keys were dropped when security footage proved Sarah's innocence. Her record was expunged, removing one barrier to employment. She began working part-time at a different therapy clinic, slowly rebuilding her professional reputation. Her published articles were restored after the false complaints were dismissed. Aiden's therapy sessions revealed the depth of his confusion. He'd been taught that protecting family meant keeping secrets. He'd learned that love required control. Unlearning these lessons would take years. His therapist specialized in children from coercive control situations, understanding the unique dynamics of trauma bonded to autism. The shelter worker whose safety I'd compromised accepted my apology but maintained professional distance. I'd endangered her family and other vulnerable women for my single-minded focus on Sarah's case. The harm I'd caused in my desperation to help remained a permanent reminder of how good intentions could destroy innocent lives. My ex-boyfriend moved on, posting photos with his new girlfriend at places we'd planned to visit. The 3-year relationship had crumbled in weeks, sacrificed for someone I'd barely known. Friends who distanced themselves during my obsession didn't return. The social isolation that followed my choices became part of my new reality. Sarah's mother began attending therapy to understand her role in enabling the abuse. She'd chosen access to her grandson over protecting her daughter, a decision that haunted her. The therapeutic work of unpacking generational patterns was painful but necessary. Her relationship with Sarah remained strained but slowly improving. The financial drain of legal battles left both women struggling. Sarah's frozen accounts were finally released, but legal fees had consumed most savings. I faced student loan defaults and credit destruction. The economic violence continued long after the court victories, a reminder that winning didn't mean recovering. 1 year later, the new normal had settled into routine. Sarah had primary custody with her ex-husband maintaining bi-weekly supervised visits. I worked full-time at the domestic violence shelter, using my experience to help others navigate similar battles. The truth had been acknowledged by the legal system, though the community remained divided. Aiden was learning, slowly, that love didn't require fear. His therapy continued twice weekly. His relationship with his mother was rebuilding through careful, therapeutic steps. He still loved his father, but was beginning to understand boundaries. The child who'd been weaponized was gradually discovering his own voice. Both Sarah and I bore permanent scars from the battle: career destruction, financial ruin, social isolation, the price of fighting back. But in the shelter's support groups, I watched other women recognize their own situations in our story. The documentation strategies Sarah had hidden in therapy notes became teaching tools. Our losses served as warnings and roadmaps for others. The system that had failed Sarah initially had eventually worked, imperfectly and incompletely. Justice was partial, recovery ongoing, victory mixed with permanent losses. The fairy tale ending of complete vindication and restoration didn't exist. Instead, two women continued forward, damaged but not destroyed, building new lives while helping others recognize coercive control before it consumed everything they'd built. The work continued daily, unglamorous and exhausting, but necessary.